spent about half of the 2020s hosting a podcast called Delayed Replay, recapping and reviewing movies that came out on time in my universe but got delayed in that other universe. And as such, the movies as they were in my universe came out differently. Some listeners not of this universe even think that this is an improvised comedy podcast. And hey, let them think what they want. It's entertaining either way, right? I'm Steven Shinder, and you're listening to Delayed Replay Season 6. Hashtag 6 seasons about movies. New episode every other Saturday. Unless I say otherwise. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed or canceled or what have you in that other universe but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, Steven Shinder, and joining me to talk about Hypno Hustler, one of those other Spider-Man villain-focused movies, it is Mondo joining me once again. How are you at this time, moment, thing?
This time moment thing is going fantastic. It is awesome. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to talk about Hypno. I'm really excited to talk about Hypno.
Yeah, so this was quite a strange choice. But well, first off, what's your history with, I guess, Spider-Man and Spider-Man villains and I guess comic book movies in general?
Oh, Spider-Man has been probably my first my first step into superheroism. I guess we're just making up all sorts of words today, and and I say that because when I was growing up, there was the video game console was the Sega Genesis, with Super Nintendo, and on that particular console, there were some very strong Spider-Man games. One called Maximum Carnage, which to this day is one of the most revered Spider-Man games of that side-scrolling era. So, Spider-Man has always been, a popular superhero because of his wit, because of his charisma, but also the idea that, hey, I could be on a school field trip and I can get bit by something and I can gain these superpowers and go from being the super nerdy person, which, like, let's be honest, at that time in life, most comic book readers were kind of deemed to be nerdy, right? Like, let's just say it is what it was. So I could take that and I could become a superhero, which was always really cool. The idea. And, the villains, I kind of feel like the Spider-Man villains had always kind of, I don't know, they always kind of took a weird backseat because you had Venom, in that universe. You had the Green Goblin, you had Rhino, you had those big ones, but there's so many of these sort of smaller ones from the comics that I feel like don't get as much attention, but should.
Yeah, and there are also super obscure ones that I don't know about until they announce these movies, like El Muerto. Like, nobody knew who El Muerto was. And Hypno Hustler, I wasn't really familiar with, but they were like, hey, Donald Glover is going to be in this. And I'm like, oh, I like him and his performances, so maybe it'll be watchable. So I did have a curiosity over this one when it was announced. But yeah, so he plays Antoine Delsoin, who is the lead singer in this uh band called Mercy Killers. And he also has this guitar. And in this adaptation, they kind of put their own spin on the music. I mean, when you read a comic, you can't hear the music, right? It's one of those uh hurdles when you have to, like, okay, pretend you know what this sounds like type of thing. But here it's a blend of rock and rap, which makes sense if you're casting Donald Glover. I mean, he's childish Gambino. He's really good at that sort of thing. But what'd you think of the music in this?
I thought the music was really cool, and going back to the casting of Donald Glover, I think that that was extremely smart and awesome because not only did we get Donald Glover in a new movie, right? We also got new Childish Gambino music out of it. It was kind of a twofer. So this is one of those really cool movies that kind of felt old school because it had a soundtrack to it, and it had a soundtrack that was exclusive to the movie. And I know you can say things like Wicked One and Two, they have a soundtrack. Some of these musicals have soundtracks and things like that, like the Disney movies. But man, going back to I want to say 2002, we're talking about Spider-Man, right? One of the coolest movie soundtracks I've ever heard and I've ever owned was the music inspired by the original like Sony Spider-Man movie, and I kind of felt that again with this. So, man, the music was cool. It fit really well with the movie, and it felt really well with the casting of this character too.
Yeah, and Donald Glover is no stranger to these sorts of roles. I mean, this particular movie, again, leaning into the whole multiverse thing, begins with this opening narration and like illustrations thing that shows like in many universes or in the Spider-Verse or whatever, there are some of the same faces as different people, and you see like Donald Glover as a couple different versions of the Prowler and as his Miles Morales that he voiced in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, and I think another one of his roles as well. And then it shows like, okay, in this universe, we're showing you this face is the face of Antoine, this guy in this band who is gonna become the Hypno Hustler in this movie. So, and they also showed like an animated Deadpool who's voiced by Donald Glover. Really weird to include that in there too. But yeah, it kind of in a weird but I guess kind of unique way of showing like telling the audience, yeah, we know that some actors have played multiple comic book roles and we're totally leaning into that and acknowledging that. But what did you think of that choice?
I thought that was really cool. And you mentioned, you know, character or actors playing multiple comic book heroes or voicing them. We're at this really cool time in our timeline where we have all these other superhero projects, right? These video games, whether they're through Lego, whether they're just through the studio, but they're not voiced by the actual voice actors that we see on screen, and the animated stuff, and you do get a mix and a conglomeration of this one person may voice several different characters that you don't even necessarily realize it's them unless you go look at the liner notes or go look at the credits. So I thought that was a cool nod to that as well.
Yeah. And this opening of the movie where, he and his band are playing and they also like make some jabs at this other band who I guess are like their rivals. They're called the Simpletons. And they feel like more commercial radio friendly type of thing. And they perform at this nightclub called Beyond Forever, but the club manager isn't paying them very well. And so the band is like, very talking about, what should we do? And they eventually decide, like, if there's a safe in the club, one of us should try to steal the money from that. It's what we deserve. And so Antoine draws a short straw and ends up being the one trying to rob the safe. And this very much felt like an inversion of the what we're used to with like Spider-Man's origin, where he doesn't get, well, in the 2002 movie anyway, doesn't get paid very much and then lets a burglar go away. In this moment, it's like they kind of merge those two archetypes into one. But what'd you think of this sequence when they're trying to break into the safe and whatnot?
So I thought it was really funny. Not funny, but clever. Because, like you mentioned, it does fuse the two sort of archetypes together. And it is sort of like that origin of a character. And that's something that I feel Marvel has been doing a much better job of. I don't need a whole movie showing a character's entire life to get this little snippet of how they become a character within the last 20 minutes of the movie. You know, I liked how they kind of throw these little things in there, and they've kind of started to, how do I put this? Kind of soften the origin stories a little bit to that extent. I want to go back to the Simpletons though. I don't know if you caught this or not, but they were clearly a riff and a joke on Nickelback, which I thought was hilarious. Uh, um, so I don't know if anybody else caught that, but I did, and I thought it was so funny that they looked almost identical to like the 2005 2006 Nickelback lineup, which was pretty funny to me.
Yeah, I this was something I heard people talking about after the fact, but and yeah, I'm not as familiar with Nickelback as other people are, but I know like the meme of like, oh, at least they're better than Nickelback or whatever. And I'm like, are Nickelback really not that good? Like, do I need to like do a deep dive of their music and form an opinion? Like, I don't know.
Look, I'm a Nickelback fan. I'm not afraid to admit it.
Okay.
I listen to Nickelback almost daily, but I just thought it was funny that they kind of went into that sort of cultural idea. It's actually funny in the. I told you about the soundtrack that they actually perform a song on the soundtrack called "Silver Side Up," which is actually the name of a Nickelback album.
Oh, wow.
um, which is pretty funny. Um, and there's a sequence right before. I don't know if you caught this or not either, but right before we get to the sequence where they're in the safe, they're trying to crack it. There's that whole piece. There's a fan who asks, "Can you autograph my photograph?" Which is also a very popular Nickelback song, and it's also a popular meme that you've probably seen going around. Look at this photograph; it'll have a picture or something, and the lead singer of Nickelback holding it up. So the very funny. But going back to that scene, sorry, I I couldn't not talk about that when we were talking about the Simpletons.
No,
But
yeah, this is what we do, you know?
but that scene was cool. It was dark, um, and it kind of had because up to this point in the movie, it was a it was a fun. It had some darkish undertones because it is a villain origin story. But up to this point in the movie, things were relatively fun. Things were colorful. It was like that musical, punk rock rap scene, Um, and then we get here, and it's darker, it's dingier, and it really is metaphoric to what was happening with our main character.
Yeah. And people could kind of, I guess, relate to the whole dilemma of, being a musician and not getting paid as much as you want to. And I mean, people tend to point to streaming, online music streaming as like a big negative factor in that. But here, like the way they touch on it feels very old school because in this opening anyway, it's basically like, hey, the people running this club aren't paying us what we're worth. Um, but it is something that I think is universal to musicians. Now, Antoine, he's able to get money from the safe, but the manager like sees him, and so now there's this whole chase sequence where he's running and he has his guitar in his hand, and during this chase sequence something happens that changes his guitar into this sort of hypnotic device. Do you want to tell the listeners like what happens there?
During this chase sequence, he runs through like this magnetic sort of, it's not necessarily like a magnetic field, but he runs almost through. Uh, you know how in some movies they'll have like those laser like barriers that are up that are supposed to like not necessarily stop anybody, but at least like alarms almost. You know, like
Yeah.
lasers. You know. He ran through those, but they were a little weirder. And not only did it affect his guitar, it affected his headphones too, because he also has headphones around his neck. And it it changed the frequency of his guitar, which then, like you pointed out, allowed him to play certain notes on the guitar and and hypnotize his his enemies, his assailants. I don't know what you want to call them in this case, but yeah, no, it was really kind of cool how it all happened, and just the idea, you know, because I mean, let's be honest, I thought that was also really, how do I put this? Really appropriate for our times, because there's all this talk about how, you know, like different types of energy affect people in certain things. You know, like I'm sure we've heard it, like our cell phones causing all these ailments, or earbuds, you know, Bluetooth, all of those things. And to see that they actually made it incorporated into it affecting other electronics, I thought was actually really cool and kind of an old school concept if you really think about it.
Yeah, and when he after this happens, when he gets surrounded and they're trying to pull his guitar away from him, he like accidentally strums a string, like, makes a note while he's yelling, don't take my guitar. And then all of a sudden, like, they back away from him and the guitar, and he's like really perplexed that they are like, a few feet away from him and just stone cold staring. And he looks at his guitar like he's figured it out and plays a little bit more. And it's like, you didn't see me steal anything. And, basically like doing a Jedi mind trick. And I mean, he also played a Star Wars character. So there's that tie in.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I feel like that's something that Glover and Childish Gambino collectively have started to do a really good job in, and starting to incorporate their different sort of projects together.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're two different people and they collaborate. Yeah. Yeah, so he tells his bandmates about like the guitar's powers, and that they like don't believe him. And then at their next show, he basically during one of their songs, he basically sings some lyrics that uh say something along the lines of, now rain all your cash on us or whatever. And everyone like throws their dollar bills and coins at the stage. There are even like a couple credit cards or debit cards or something, is and his bandmates are just like, wait, is this for real? So I thought that was quite the spectacle. And there was a moment where a nickel was like right there smack dab in the middle of the frame, so I kind of wonder if maybe that's a Nickelback reference as well.
It could have been. It very well could have been. And yeah, I thought the credit cards being thrown up were a funny bit, because it's like, well, okay,
Yeah.
what do I do with just this? But yeah, no, I have to say, and I know we're about halfway through this, but I have to say, this was probably one of the most refreshing Marvel movies I've seen in a while.
Yeah, it's weird because you kind of want it to, well, these like villain movies to be more connected to the characters you're used to, but with someone as charismatic as Donald Glover and telling a story where it's kind of cathartic to see a band do so well. Like I'm a sucker for those kinds of stories, being a huge music fan, I guess. So yeah, it's quite the sight. And there's this what's it called? He's trying to convince his bandmates that the guitar works, and to like firmly prove it to them again, they write a song that's full of toilet humor, and it's about a proctologist. It's a really awful sounding song. And so they play it, and for a moment like the crowd is booing, but then uh Antoine says the words that allow people to like give them all their money again. And it's by this time, the bandmates are convinced, because like either this is real or you paid all these people to do this and you don't have enough money to like pay everyone to do all of this.
Yeah, yeah, no, of course. And I will say, going back to the proctologist song, we were talking about Donald Glover sort of almost fusing different things together and having highlights that look like other roles. It honestly sounded like something he probably may have sang or wrote as Troy from Community.
Yeah. And so the band is getting some acclaim. There's this magazine that's called like Original Magazine or something. Um, Probably a name that's been used in real life, but it's a music magazine in this case. And does a montage showing them on like magazine covers and uh like news article photos. And so they're they kind of got a little tour going on, gigging at different places. What'd you think of this montage here?
Well, I thought it was interesting, and what I thought was interesting was kind of like we've talked about with the hypnosis of giving people their money. It shows them almost hypnotizing these venue owners to give them the gigs in the first place. So
Yeah.
this kind of starts to show this is now going beyond just asking or just getting money from people. It's showing how to get things. And there was even a spot where they were in a restaurant, and you saw the server coming by with a little black pokey thingy, and you saw him whip his guitar out, and you get the idea that he was hypnotizing them to get out of having to pay for that. So you start to see this being used now in other means.
Yeah, and so they kind of blur the lines, because you want to root for these musicians, but you also kind of wonder, is it right for them to do things this way? So I guess you could say it's morally gray and whatnot. I forgot to mention, like the club manager, after seeing how successful they're getting, offers to be like the band's manager. And Antoine is like, I'm pretty sure we can get our own gigs ourselves. And so, given that he has the guitar and whatnot. But another weird effect of this movie is that it not only hypnotizes the characters, the music from the guitar also hypnotized the audience watching the movie to keep on coming back to see the movie so that it can make more money, you know?
Exactly, and it starts to get almost it starts to work within itself, and like you had mentioned, that they start getting radio time, and these notes and these things start to get in people's cars and through people's, Spotify's, or in this case, Spideyfies, just whatever it may be, like it starts to, this is going to sound like a pun and I don't mean it to, but it starts to create a web of how these things are happening within this. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, and we also get a portion of the movie where they're working in a studio recording their own album, and there are moments where the bandmates are like butting heads, the typical tension you'll see between bandmates in a successful band. But at some point, they do kind of rally together and realize, you know what, we shouldn't be working too hard. We need to take a break at some point. And so they go to a bowling alley and they, just relax and bond there. And I really enjoy when movies have just slice of life moments that are chill and everyone's just hanging out. Like there aren't enough movies that have that sort of thing, at least that come in my line of sight, I guess.
No, you're right, because every movie is this go, 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 right? It's the because they're trying to get as much action in the movie as possible, right? Where we're trying to see Hypno do as much as possible to get Spider-Man in the movie as quickly as possible, right? But this was kind of a moment of, let's mellow out a little bit. Let's kind of chill out. Let's take a step back. And it kind of reminded me as a moviegoer, hey, I'm here to enjoy a movie. I have a whole life going on outside of this movie theater, but this 2 hours is an opportunity for me to get an escape from it.
Exactly. And, he left the guitar at the studio because he was like, I need to put all my focus to hanging out with my friends, my bandmates, we're all in this together, that sort of thing. But ironically, that kind of comes back to bite him because when they return to the studio, they see that the club manager had gone inside and has a guitar, and he's like looking for this and basically does this reveal where he says that he installed the lasers on purpose, knowing that someone performing at his club would be desperate enough to, like, I don't know, I guess run through the lasers with an instrument and headphones. Like, I don't know how he knew that this would happen, but he basically is saying, I made you successful, you owe me. And it's just, yeah, what'd you think of this reveal scene here?
Well, I think it's actually kind of made it make a little more sense because you have to think people probably walked through that hallway where those lasers were set up the whole time, right? But I think it was sort of, it showed how predatory the music industry is because you had this venue owner who knew he was underpaying these individuals, right? And then set up a plot to try to exploit them, to almost try to use them. However, he lost control of it immediately and then tries to come back to make the claim, I made you, in hopes to make some sort of gain out of it. And at this point, Hypno's become way too big. And it's not going to go the way that he intends this conversation to go.
Yeah, I mean, he does, Antoine makes the case that he needs them now because, like, what is he gonna, like, what band at this point sounds better than them now that they've shown what they're capable of? But he does get a little bit of a one up on them by using the hypnosis powers of the guitar and saying, you will give me 60% of your profits. And it's like, whoa, that's really, like, in the old days, a prevalent band manager, like you said, predatory practices, I guess.
Yeah, of course. And it's like I said, I think this whole movie does a very good job of kind of shedding light on some of those things, and like we talked about, this whole this whole the plot of this whole movie essentially started because Antoine is a struggling musician and he's not getting paid and he's having trouble getting by, and he sees an opportunity to maybe rectify that, right? Um, and and I think that just really goes to show how that is, and especially in today's day and age, we hear all the time, right? Spotify doesn't pay, but a quarter of a penny per stream, or whatever it may be, and the artist deserves more money because all of those things, right? We're not going to get into that, but that's those are the conversations that you hear about
Yeah,
the
artists
music
are
industry.
only getting a nickel back per song or something.
Yeah, I see what you did there. Um, and and it's and then when you look at that nickel, a penny of it goes to the artist, you know 2 cents of it go to the label, and then another 2 cents goes to their manager, or their publication company, or whatever it may be. So those are the things that you hear, and I think it does a really cool job, at least for us music fans, to kind of throw those nuggets in
Yeah, and it kind of comes full circle because having to work with this manager now, at some point they realize, we gotta steal back that guitar, and they put on these outfits that are pretty much like his outfit from the comics, and each of the bandmates have like different variations. And he's basically like, these are supposed to be for our next big performance, but I think now they'll be useful as heist outfits. And like, it's such a strange way to introduce these outfits, but yeah, they basically try breaking into the manager's house to steal the guitar, uh, like at night. What you think of this heist sequence?
I thought it was really cool for a couple of reasons. One, the outfits to me were very reminiscent of what you would have saw in the old game, Jet Set Radio. I don't know if you've played that game or not, but they were very reminiscent to me of that kind of style, which makes sense because that game was based, kind of had that comic, um, cell shaded style to it, right? And this is something right out of a comic book from the 70s. I thought it was interesting because this is kind of where we start to see new abilities that this group of villains, I guess, at this point have. Because up to this point, it's been about the guitar, right? It's been about the power of hypnosis and that. But we saw something out of this that I thought was interesting, and that was the knockout nerve gas in the boots that he had, right? So he was able. So they you start to see that this operation is now expanding, and you get the idea that this sort of feature in this outfit wasn't necessarily put in there for this particular situation. This isn't something you go home at night and think, well, I'm going to put this in there for tomorrow. This is something that, if we all know about comic books, there is a research and development sort of process. So it's kind of another idea that Hypno is about to go on a grander scale even more.
Yeah, and again, we're questioning, like, are these characters we should root for, or like how should we feel about all this? Again, it really blurs the lines and throws a wrench into things. And they it is really cool seeing each of the bandmates like have their own thing. Like, one of them is able to pick locks, another one of them is able to like squeeze through air vents and the chimney and stuff. So uh and I would say though that I kind of wish, what I think they could have done was foreshadow some of their skill sets before doing this heist. It kind of feels like they just throw them into this heist, and are like, okay, we need someone to do this, someone to do that, and just pretend that they were always capable of doing this, that type of thing.
Yeah, that and again, this kind of goes back to something I said earlier in this episode where Marvel has seemingly fast tracked the origin story to get into the drama a little bit more, to get into the action a little bit quicker. And I think that when you look at things like that, sometimes those are things that get sort of left out. But at the same time, the movie centered around Hypno, not necessarily the band. So that kind of you know, an explanation piece. But I agree. I wish we would have gotten a little more of the individual bandmates, and some of those abilities that they have, and why they have those. Like you mentioned, the individual who can pick locks. Like, does he have a past in doing that? Is that something that he has a hobby of, or something? Or like the individual who can squeeze through tight places. Like, does he have a history of that? Does he have you know a personality trait that lends to that?
Yeah, exactly. They do get the guitar and are able to like best the manager, but they still have this other obstacle where their music is now on Spotify, and so they try to like they try to like hack into the server or whatever, and when that doesn't work, they do this really cool like virtual sequence where we kind of see like inside the interwebs, but when that doesn't work, they realize we have to break into the Spotify headquarters and do it. And so it's like this movie has like a heist and then another heist right after it. Like, what's going on here?
Well, you're right, but like, let's kind of also be honest. Like, when you think of larger groups, right? That's what you kind of think of as heists. Like, when you think of ensembles, like that's sort of the MO.
Yeah. Although now it's kind of easier for them now because they could just like walk in and use the guitar to hypnotize people. And, people watching the security footage will question things though. So they do get people running after them for a bit. And it even comes at a point where Spider-Man himself shows up here, and they're really vague about like who's playing him here. I guess it's supposed to tie into the idea that anyone can be Spider-Man, but yeah, it's really weird seeing Spider-Man fight on the side of the streaming service that is making all the profits and whatever.
Yeah, I actually thought the Spider-Man piece was funny. It kind of reminded me of the final shot of Peacemaker season one, where they had the Justice League, but because they were still going through all the contract negotiations and there were still a lot of questions about the DCU and all of those particular pieces, you saw them, but all their faces were shadowed out.
Yeah.
It was very reminiscent, but it's in a movie and not just on a streaming platform television series. It was in a full fledged movie. But yeah, you're right. And Spider Man in this movie I think he had like two or three lines. I don't think he had a whole lot of dialogue, so you couldn't really even get an idea of who was voicing him. Um, and but to a point though, I like that because this movie wasn't about Spider Man, and I think that they did a really good job of making this the villain's movie.
Yeah. And it was a cool sequence, seeing them fight Spider-Man here, but it didn't drag on for too long. Like, I feel like it would be very easy to make a sequence like that have too much action fatigue and make it less of their movie, which is weird to say because with the Spider-Man villain movie, it's like, why not just make a Spider-Man movie? But here, because Donald Glover is so charming, and maybe even because of the hypnotic uh effect that this movie has on the audience, which I'm sure there's ethical stuff about that, which could call into question whether they'll do another one of these. But like, I was just all in with following these characters instead.
Well, I think it lends itself to another idea too. And this is something you actually just brought up a few moments ago. Well, off the top, is that a lot of the Spider-Man villains are very obscure. And I don't want to turn this into a Marvel versus DC debate or conversation, but when you think of DC has like their villains are almost as well known as all of the heroes, right? But like when you look at from top to bottom, that's just what it is. Like when you look at Marvel, yeah, you have some very notable villains, but Marvel has also done, in my opinion, a terrible job of constantly using the same villains over and over again. Um, and we wanted to see something new, and I feel like this was an opportunity for Marvel to say, "Hey, we have some cool villains too. We have some cool characters. Let us show you what we have." And start coming to the theater a little more excited of, oh, we might see something like this when the next Captain America 74 comes out, right? Like we may have something that we can share with you, that we can show you. We're more than Loki. We're more than Thanos. We're more than Doc Ock. We're more than these characters that, have been overused. They, take a look.
Yeah, that's an interest. I feel like I have a slightly different perspective because, yeah, they like you mentioned, they definitely reuse villains like Loki, and Thanos made a few appearances before becoming like the major villain. But I feel like a common critique of Marvel movies anyway, like not touching on the comics in this instance, that the movies and I guess shows sometimes have these one-off villains that they don't do enough with, and then suddenly they're gone, like either forever or for a really long time. And when I think of DC villains, I think that they reuse some of their villains as well, like especially, well, I guess particularly when it comes to Batman's rogues, like Joker and whatnot, and Superman's foes like Zod and Lex Luthor. So I think it really depends on like which character, like which heroes you're honing in on in these comparisons. But I feel like both Marvel and DC kind of have like the similar problems of not showing enough of the more obscure villains, and also like reusing some of their more popular villains frequently, if that makes sense.
It does, and and like I said, when you look at the DC, when I was a kid, I had all sorts of Jokers and Penguins and Mister Freezes and Riddlers and all sorts of action figures, right? Because those characters were so popular. Like the villains were almost more popular than Batman to an extent, right? At least from a toy perspective, certain things. And when you
Yeah.
look at Marvel, it's not really that way. I've never had a Sandman action figure. I've never had a, I've never had a Rhino action figure. I think I had a Juggernaut action figure from X-Men at one point. But I don't know. To me, that's the difference. And I think this was just Marvel's way of saying, hey, we have a lot more to offer than like what you said, because and you're right. They'll show these characters on like a one-off. Like you may see Spider-Man putting some obscure villain in the back of an ambulance or on the back of a police car, and that's the only time you ever see that villain. Like this villain in the comics that had a 2-year comic book series has been relegated to a 12-second cameo getting shoved in the back of a police car.
Yeah. Yeah. And while you were saying all that, I was trying to imagine what would a Sandman action figure be like. Would it just be like, imagine if it was just a pile of sand, or maybe there's like this sand hourglass that's shaped like a man or something, like just something cheap.
But I also think, and I do want to point out, yes, Marvel television shows back in the '90s were super popular, but I think this also kind of sheds light on. For the longest time, DC really did kind of own a lot of that sort of media corner. Where when we think of villains, we think of the Joker, we think of the Penguin, we think of the Lex Luthor, those characters, because of things like the Batman animated television series, all of the where funky, pretty successful Batman movies that have come out through over the last 20 years. So I think that that's also a big part too. I think there may just be a little more established in casual fans' mindsets.
Yeah. And, depending on the fan, they'll focus on different things, and, different cases can be made depending on what anyone is focusing on. But yeah, it's certainly a lot to think about, like which villains should we use, how should we use them, and how often. And I do like when they sort of go more obscure and then show us, oh, you can actually tell a story with this villain. And yeah, I thought that this movie was pretty unconventional in some regards. It even ends with like, the band, now that they're on their own and have their own agency, they're like, all right, now that we're off of that streaming service, we are able to strike out on our own. And it shows that they've made a Bandcamp page for themselves. That was kind of a nice little thing. They're like showing that, oh yeah, on Bandcamp the musicians make more profits than on something like Spidey-Fi.
I thought the marketing was really cool because you could actually go on Bandcamp and actually see this band's profile on it. Like, I thought that was actually really interesting. Like, did a very good job with the immersive marketing with this. And I think that that's something that, again, I feel like, I feel like these movie companies, these studios, they've gotten both lazy, but they've also gotten everything is too focus group centric, right? They probably had a focus group 15 years ago that said, no, we don't care about those sort of marketings. We don't like seeing all these things shoved in our face. So we don't want any part of it. So these studios said, no, we don't have to do that. We don't need to do those things. But but those things are fun, right? They're refreshing, and they kind of tie it all in together. And it makes a movie like Hypno go from feeling like an obscure superhero villain movie to an event. And I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but it makes it feel like when you sit down in that movie theater, you're not just witnessing a movie. You're a part of a cinematic event.
Yeah, it's like you're part of this. I mean, the music definitely helps. It, is like topping the charts and whatnot. And it's like, I mean, I know that hypnotic powers are like part of this movie and its marketing, but I genuinely think the music sounds really good either way. So, yeah, I just love that aspect of it. All right, so what are your final thoughts and score out of 10 and unit of measurement for that score for Hypno Hustler?
So I'm actually going to go an 8.5 And we're going to use 8.5 hypnotoads.
Of course. All right. Yeah, I think for me, like, even though I enjoyed this, I think I'm a little bit lower, but ever so slightly. I'm like, I think 8 out of 10 Hypnos, the Pokemon Hypno. Yeah, like I thought this was definitely something different. It had something to say about the music industry, though it also kind of muddies the waters of like what's right to do, what's wrong to do, like in terms of marketing and business practices and getting your name out there. But it was entertaining, and Donald Glover, he can sell a movie, like the even I don't know if he's ever been in a movie where the script is like super awful, but I'm sure that his performance in such a movie would still be really salvageable and worth watching. So,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Glover is probably one of the most energetic um, actors, and I mean, I'll say artists of our time. And I
Yeah.
don't think he necessarily gets the credit he deserves when you look at all the things he's been able to accomplish, all the different kinds of roles he's able to do. His range is incredible. I mean, you look at him from Community to Star Wars to this to his music career.
Yeah,
I mean,
Atlanta.
Atlanta. I mean, so many things that I mean, he's starting to build a case for, in my opinion, one of Hollywood's best. And I for whatever reason, he kind of seems to always be not forgotten, but he's not somebody that comes to a lot of people's mind. And I hope that projects like this are what kind of start to get him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the hypnotic powers will ensure that, I'm sure. But but yeah, thanks for joining me for this episode, Mondo. Did you want to plug anything or recommend that people watch something or whatnot?
You know what? I don't. I'll be honest. I haven't really been watching a whole lot. I've been really. This is gonna sound really weird. I've been on a huge Survivor kick um, over the last couple of months, and man, I just can't get enough of that show. But that's a pretty popular show, so I'm pretty sure no, so many people actually know about that already. So
Yeah, I'm like aware of the tropes of Survivor, but I don't think I've ever like watched a full episode, so I kind of don't know like what the fuss is all about.
yeah, no, it's a good show. It's a good series.
Okay. And it's been around for like 25
20
years
years.
or something,
Yeah.
right? Like do I need to watch every season to understand what's going on? Is it that type of show?
No, it's every season is its own thing. Every season has, you know, not every season, but they've kind of changed up the rules a little bit every couple seasons. Certain seasons have certain aspects to them that other seasons may not have. I will say, like, you may kind of get some lore going through. Like, you may, like, and what I mean is like, they may mention, like, no one's done this since season 7, where this person did this, or something like that. But you don't necessarily need to know the season to know what it is, right?
Okay.
Um, and every once in a while, you will see returning players, and they may mention some of their previous like experiences. Like there's one season. Hopefully, this isn't a spoiler. The season is 10 years old now, but there was like a season called like Second Chances, and they actually brought back like the very first runner up from the show. So like
Oh
going all
wow.
the way back to 2000, they brought back the person who was runner up. And and you kind of got to this point now where a lot of the people that are on it are super fans of the show that have been watching it for 20 years. Or and sometimes you'll even find people that are in their early 20s, maybe 30s, that grew up watching the show with their family and are now there to experience it. And there's certain aspects of it like that too.
Nice. Yeah, so folks, if you're one of the handful of people like me who hasn't watched Survivor, then I guess watch Survivor to see if it's for you. All
Yeah.
right. So that'll do it for this episode. The podcast will be back in 2 weeks with a different topic. And without further delay, have a good day. All right. So, yeah, that was kind of an interesting Sony-Marvel movie. Came out earlier this year or within the past year or so. I don't know. Time is weird, and there are so many different comic book movies these days. But now, time for the plugs, and then you'll hear my other self from that other universe talk about what he's been watching in non spoiler fashion, talking about some of the recent shows he's seen and whatnot. But you can email delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on the music industry. And if you're into music talk, you can also check out a podcast/vlog called Yes Shift, where me and my dad talk about the band Yes and about prog rock in general. We recently interviewed a couple people involved in Progstock, an upcoming prog rock festival, and I've been reviewing some stuff as well, like records and such. So if that's your cup of tea, check that out. And you can also check out Drum Talk TV Brilliance. There are recently some interesting Q&As with big artists, and there are more on the way, as well as some fun game shows over there. So yeah, you can check that out at drumtalktvbrilliance.com. And check out my novels, Standalones and Stepping Stones novels. Go to stevenshinder.com for info on the two that are out. I'm gradually trying to get back into working on these books. It's been tough, but I've been getting a bit of inspiration lately. So yeah, check out my socials in the show notes. Follow me at those places. And without further delay, here's my other self. Alright, hey everyone. So beginning with comic book related stuff, I see that Thunderbolts is now on Disney Plus over here, and I see lots of posts in my feed of people saying that they're annoyed hearing other people say, wow, why didn't anyone tell me this movie was good, when, when it came out in theaters, people actually did say that it was really good, and lots of people just didn't want to listen because of some of the Marvel hate, superhero movie hate that's out there. I don't know what you want to call it. But anyway, Mondo mentioned Peacemaker on this episode, and season 2 is actually 2 episodes in so far. And going back to that scene of the Justice League cameo, I thought they handled this pretty well, showing that season 2 is a different universe by beginning with a recap that says previously in the DCU, and it shows that events in season 1 were generally the same, but the Justice League cameo was instead the Justice Gang from the recent Superman movie. I thought that was a clever way to do it, but of course you still have people being really confused about what's canon and what's not, and calling this a retcon as if it changed the DCEU, when really it's just a similar parallel universe. And yeah, people are just wording this sort of thing differently, similar to the whole Ice Age being canon to Alien Earth type thing, when really Ice Age the movie is a movie within Alien Earth. But anyway, I'm surprisingly enjoying Peacemaker season 2 so far. I wasn't that into the character in the movie, and not that into season 1 or the opening intro, but I love the opening intro for this one. A new song, new dance sequence, and I feel more invested. The multiverse stuff in the trailer interested me, but I'm not sure that it's the main thing interesting me now this time around. Like, it is interesting, but I'm invested in the character stuff, so I guess that's a good thing. And yeah, so put simply, Peacemaker the one we're following in season 2, he's already in the DCU, so he's not from the DCEU going through a door into the DCU like some might have thought from the trailer. But yeah, I'm curious to see where the rest of this goes. But regarding Alien Earth, I think we're about halfway through the season. There are 4 episodes out of 8 that have aired so far. And it is, it started out as a slow burn, and you come to realize that the show, it, at least to me, feels like it's more about the androids and synths, synthetic life, than the aliens, which I guess is fine. The Alien franchise has touched a lot on artificial intelligence and that sort of thing, and here they have a twist on it. So it is kind of strange though how I'd have to do the math on this, but it does kind of feel like more alien media, like on-screen media I should say, not counting video games, just movies and TV show, feel like they're more about artificial intelligence than about the aliens, like ever so slightly, like it might be 60-40 or something like that. But the cinematography is pretty good. It's what you'd expect from a Noah Hawley type of project. And yeah, I have been wondering, like, what is the point of setting this 2 years before the original Alien movie? And I've seen a couple of different theories, so I'm curious to see what the reason ends up being. But that is sort of the question of, like, what's the reason for this, this chronological placement of this show. Yeah, and I thought it was possible, a possibility that came to mind, not regarding that, but in terms of how I would feel about the show, was that maybe I wouldn't be as into the show because of the idea of aliens being on Earth before the first movie. And I know that was a thing in Alien vs. Predator, but surprisingly that aspect has not been on my mind so much while watching this show. I'm just more wondering, okay, they're doing this, and okay, why are they exploring this aspect? And I just really want to see how the whole ends up being. I get the vibe that other people are enjoying the show more than I am. I feel like I'm kind of in a limbo state right now, just trying to get used to the pacing and trying to see what the overall point of the show is, which, I'll see to the end. Also, just one more episode left of Dexter Resurrection, as far as I know. I don't know if there's going to be another season of this, if they plan on that, but yeah, big stuff happened on the penultimate episode. I won't say what, but I feel like I'm not sure if I reacted how they intended me to react. I was kind of just like, oh yeah, of course that would happen, I guess. And it's a big thing that happens, and it's kind of confusing. Like, how are you supposed to feel when watching this show about this guy who kills people, but he only tries killing bad people, but he's also skirting around the law and stuff? So it's like, and, trying to be anonymous and taking everything into his own hands. It's like, I know that superhero shows and movies are kind of like that, but with here you have the serial killing aspect. So it's, and this isn't new for Dexter. I've watched the original run and whatnot, I read the books, but yeah, I don't know. I don't feel I don't know. I don't feel worried about what could happen in the finale. I'm just, I wonder what's going to happen, that type of thing. I'm kind of nonchalant about it, but I have enjoyed the season more than I thought I would. But also, apparently, Dexter Original Sin, and I did not know this, that it originally got renewed for a second season, and more recently they reversed that decision and canceled it. So, when I heard that news, I was like, wait, they were thinking of making a second season? I thought this was just a limited series, something to whet people's appetites between New Blood and Resurrection, and that would be it. So I don't know. If Resurrection keeps on going, or if there's another show that takes place after, they could very well still, I think, use the younger actors from the prequel show in flashbacks if they really want to, instead of doing a full-on second season. But yeah, I'm not really craving a second season from Original Sin. I ended up enjoying that more than I thought I would, but it's like, how much can you do without risking, retconning, the possibility of retconning the lore and contradicting some of that stuff. So, I'm more for pushing the story forward in the timeline than going backward. So, yeah, very curious to see what'll happen in the finale. There's a whole final season of Resident Alien I still haven't watched yet. I know I need to get to that. I've heard it's good. I don't think I mentioned this last time, but I'm watching the second season of Wednesday. My friend Haley and I watched the first 2 episodes on the premiere day, and then 2 weeks later, the other day we watched the 3rd episode. Was that 2 weeks after or 3 weeks after? I think 3 weeks after, because part 2 of the season comes out this coming week. So yeah, like with the number of episodes and the number of weeks, it's like they might as well have just released 1 episode per week, like a normal show. Like I think that would have been better than how they did it here. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. Maybe not as much as season 1 so far. The 3rd episode, I guess people could argue, is kind of filler, but I thought it was fun, seeing this competition, competition type thing where the characters are camping and it's a rival group. But yeah, I have a feeling season 2 is not going to be as, when the whole thing is out, not as well received as season 1, and that I know that they already renewed it for a 3rd season, so I'm kind of expecting that maybe they'll treat season 3 as the final season. It kind of is a trend with some Netflix shows, like Lock and Key and Sweet Tooth, I think, went that route, only having 3 seasons. And, they were able to wrap up. But, yeah, I do wonder if the 3-year wait, I'm fine with years of waiting between seasons of shows, because it's sometimes tough for me to keep up with shows these days anyway. But I do wonder if people are gonna change the way streaming shows work. What is it that makes it take a while for these new seasons to come out? Is it the budget and all the work that has to go into that, or is it actors' schedules? Like, I don't know. Are they gonna try to do streamers need to lower the budgets for certain shows so that they can come out sooner? I don't know. I definitely noticed there wasn't as much Wednesday season 2 talk online, in my feed anyway, whereas during season 1 I felt like it was everywhere. So maybe they kind of missed the mark in the momentum and all that. I haven't watched many new movies lately. I did see Mickey 17 finally. I thought it was fine. Robert Pattinson did a good job, but I feel like people enjoyed that movie more than I did. And I've mainly been watching reruns of South Park, and the current season is 3 episodes in, and it is the 3rd episode, if like without spoiling it, finally ended something that I've been pretty annoyed with in South Park for the last several years. So I thought that was a good decision, and they are releasing a new episode every other week, it seems. So hey, maybe take a cue from Delayed Replay. But there are threads that I'm curious to see how they'll play out the rest of the season, so I guess we'll see. Also been keeping up with Bob's Burgers. That is some wholesome fun right there. Not sure what else to say. It's pretty funny still, that show, even after all these years. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it in terms of what I've been watching. And this podcast will be back in 2 weeks, kind of switching gears, talking about Black Phone 2. So that should be interesting to hear about. So have a good one, and without further delay, have a good day.